Hello, and welcome to Creative Assembly, a monthly program designed to bring artists together for shared learning, mutual support, and experiences in community. At each assembly, we'll interview a local creative to hear about their process and discover what inspires them. My name is Allison Green, and I will lead you through this assembly. Today, we are speaking with Chloe Duplessis.
Hi.
Welcome, Chloe.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and thank you for showing up. Chloe is a artist in her own right, but she's also a artist that does speaking engagements. She has exhibits around the country and in the Caribbean, or there's going to be
Yes.
one in the Caribbean.
Yes.
She's has a consulting group where she does creative program development and cultural capacity workshops. She also has immersive experiences where you can hire her group to go into schools or businesses and do workshops. And she has a creative community builder program. So welcome, Chloe.
Thank you.
We will talk about all the things that you are doing through this assembly. But what I really would love to know first is how you came to be. I mean, this is a Denver show, and how you came to
Right.
be living in Denver and working in Denver.
Right. So I am originally from Louisiana. If you can't tell by my accent, you will as the evening progresses. It kind of sneaks out. So we were living in North Louisiana, as you mentioned, for about 10 years. I had a creative consulting business, and my focus was to help artists, artisans, and creative entrepreneurs build that thing. So additionally, I would work with two different types of people: people who were knew that they were created for this artist life, just starting out, and then people who were on their second act. Maybe you retired, maybe you got laid off, maybe you had a life transition, and that thing that you love, you always put on the back burner, like building furniture, building jewelry, those things. Those people would come to me, and we had a ball for 10 years doing it. But I really felt that after having worked in our business and worked in government and education, I had kind of done all that I could essentially do in my home state. And I love the people of Louisiana and our culture and our history. But I kind of reached the ceiling there, and I really wanted to lean into my own work because I'd been taking pictures for over 10 years as a hobby. And then I just fell in love with it. And I got into doing digital art because my clients were working with modest budgets, some of them, and they could not afford to do graphic design. So for really special projects, I would work with a graphic designer, and for projects that they were more open to, having an organic flow, I would just start creating the work for them as a service for our clients. And the more I did it, I just fell in love with it. And so I told my husband, I said, you know what, I am shifting from photography and really leaning into graphic design and digital art. And I think I really want to pursue this and lean into it. So we had already been planning to move to Denver. Correction, we were planning to move, period. And we had a short list of 5 cities. Let me clarify that. And Denver was on the list of 5 cities. And the goal was to leave for a year. I know this will sound kind of crazy to some people. Some of my creatives will be like, that's awesome. Um, Purchase an RV, preferably an Airstream, and take our daughter, who was 3 at the time, and just travel the country for a year. She wouldn't be in school. We would just have these beautiful experiences. So that's the intention that we had initially. And I went to the eye doctor maybe 2 months before we were about to leave, and I got a diagnosis. I'm the kid that's always worn glasses, so I just didn't think anything of it. But my doctor said, I see some shading in your eye, and I want to send you to an eye specialist. So I went, and that's when I found out that I had Stargardt's disease, which is a rare form of macular degeneration. It's genetic, and it skips generations. So I think my great grandmother had it. And yeah, they basically told me that we don't know when, but you will eventually lose your sight because it attacks your central vision. So I went home and I told my husband the news, and his first thing was, this is everything that we know here. This is familiar, this is family, this is the business that you built. Are you still trying to move? And I said, just give me a day. And I just kind of sat with it, and I was like, you know what? Not only are we moving, we're still going on this road trip, and we're leaning into our purpose, because now more than ever, I've got to do this. I've got to create work and create this record for our daughter to provide this glimpse of how her mom saw the world when I'm at a point where I will not be able to share that with her. I've got to have these experiences, and I want to see as much as I can before that time happens, before I lose my vision. So we left Louisiana with the intention of traveling. We even had a blog called The Great Creative Road Trip. It was a whole thing, honey. And we got here, and I have a brother who lives in Aurora. He's a police officer and has two boys. And we got here and just fell in love with it. So we're like, okay, we'll stick around for a while. Well, that next month, the pandemic hit. So it was like, you're here, you're legit here. So we just decided to lean into our purpose. That's how we got to Denver. We got here, we just fell in love with the climate. You know, coming from the South, the humidity is like super, super fierce, and it's not really a thing here. And it was just so beautiful, and the people were nice. And I was like, I can't believe I'm not sweating and like greasy. This is a great thing. So that's how we got here. We just made the conscious decision to lean in.
I can't even imagine being told that I'm going to lose my vision. I'm a visual person, and like, you're an artist, you're a mother, you're a wife, and how does that now inform what you do moving forward, and your artwork and your intention and your business?
Well, I think it informs every aspect of it. I also think that while we don't understand certain situations, you really have the option of just saying, I'm going to just kind of wallow in this situation and wait for the curtain to close, or I'm going to choose to move on purpose. And I think that it happened for whatever reason, because I think the work that you see would not be the same work if that wasn't a part of my story and my experience. I think it's the kind of the same thing that people ask, like, how does being a woman affect your work, or being a mother or a wife? Like, all that plays a very big role in the work. But I think for me, it creates a stronger sense of urgency. If I were not losing my vision, I probably would have still have moved. But I would probably, still have my business on the side. I might be working for someone else or working back in education or government. There are a variety of options open to you that are not necessarily open when you are losing your vision. And because so little is known about this condition, no one really knows when. So I could wake up tomorrow, God forbid, and not be able to see. So for me, when I wake up in the morning and people are just like, oh, it's a good day, I'm like, honey, every day is a good day. I wake up, if I know my name, I know where I am, and I can see my kid, I'm good. Everything else is extra. So it just creates this really strong sense of urgency to create work. And I think that's why I create at such a breakneck pace. I've always been an overachiever, but like, we're creating work like every other month at this point. But it doesn't feel taxing because I absolutely love it. And I know the gift of being able to do this.
So I know we've talked in the past, but like, how many things did you create or do or experience in the pandemic because of this urgency that you have?
Right.
Or do you think because of the urgency, you were creating even more than you would have, given the pandemic?
I think the pandemic, even with its challenges, was the perfect setting for me just to really amp it up. I mean, because I was at home. But I think also because of the condition and because of kind of where I was making those shifts personally for our family, not much changed for me in the pandemic. I wasn't driving, after my diagnosis. So I was already at home. I'm a full-time mother. My husband does work outside the home, but I was already doing all those things. I'd move my office inside the house. So other than like having to wear a mask 24/7 when we left the home, or just being mindful and my heart going out to other people who were going through, not much changed for me. Like, we literally had like a 5-month jump on the pandemic. I know that sounds strange. Where was I going?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So once that realization set in, it was like, you know what? You can watch Netflix all day, or you can create. And I have nothing against it. I've just never been one to kind of just like wait for the opportunities to come. I was like, let's do this. Let's lean in. Let's do research. Let's create. And we were just rolling. We were rolling.
That's great. Great use of the pandemic also.
Right? Is that a t-shirt? I made great use of the pandemic.
So how did you get started in your digital art for the artwork that we see?
So I was already kind of designing like logos and marketing campaigns for my clients. And I started playing around with like doing abstract pieces or pieces that had rich texture just for like my own business office. Because I had an office in downtown in Shreveport, where I'm from. Shout out to Shreveport. But so I was already doing those things just to kind of beautify our home. And people would be like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what is that? And I was just like, oh, that's just something I did. And like, wait, you did that? I was like, yeah. And that really encouraged me to lean into it more. But when I got the diagnosis about losing my vision, it just made all the sense in the world. I really went into prayer and I said, you know, if I'm supposed to do this, I've got to find a way to do this that will be functional and will make sense. And the great thing about graphic design, when you hear someone is like legally blind and a visual artist, they're like, what? Right. But here's the thing. Digital art is perfect for people who have low vision, which is what I have, because with my equipment, I can enlarge the pixels as much as I need to. So an image that would be, say, like this sign right here, I can increase it to the size of this full print to do what I need to do, even on my phone. So
So you could work at a granular level.
completely. And I think that comes up too when people see pieces that I've done that have like 100 images. They're like, how are you doing this? I'm enlarging everything. And it almost makes you feel kind of like a kid in a candy store because you're just like moving things. And I love color. I love color. And I know that at some point before the vision goes, you become colorblind. So that's why my work is so saturated with color, because I just want to surround myself with as much of it as I can while I can.
On that note, let's look at blackface. And if, Chloe, if you could describe
Yes.
the image while it's getting brought up.
Yes. So blackface was one of the very first images I created once we moved to Colorado. And it is a picture of a woman with a very full face, and which I can say because it's a picture of me. But that's the funny thing about when I create my work. Once I create the work, I don't really have that connection to it. I want to protect it. I want it to go to someone who will appreciate it or be on display, but I never really see me in any of my work or anything that I create. So this is a woman, and she is almost like a bust of a woman from the bust in the head, and she has a head wrap on, and she's kind of looking up, like gazing upward, and her face is blue, and her head wrap is kind of like yellow and orange and pink, really pop filter type colors. And the funny thing about that piece is that when people see that piece, they were like, oh, this is really cool. Did you draw this? I'm like, no, I'm a digital artist. And they're like, yeah, but like, how did you do it? It actually started with a full color picture of me. And then I just lifted all the pigment from the picture and then just played for about an hour or so with the equipment. And that's what turned out. I was never even intending to exhibit that piece. I just posted it and someone saw it on a Zoom call, like we were all on last year. And they were just like, what is this awesomeness? And I was like, well, thank you very much. But really, that was just me looking up. And the more I disconnected from the piece, I was just like, this is going to be called blackface because culturally, black faces are not adored by most people, by Western culture. They're not seen as being like regal and urban, if that's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. So this picture just really kind of made me feel like, yeah, we are dope, we are cool. And as you see in my digital work that uses pop filters, there will almost always be a series of blue shades because I feel like that color most resonates with people of color in America, because we have had the blues for a long time and we're very, very resilient. But even sometimes when you see people of color in print or photography going back years and years and years, like Gordon Park pictures, even if they're smiling, there's this underlying sadness because of what they've had to endure. And I think that really, really supports the conversation of Black trauma and Black joy that we all really dealt with last year. And the truth is, there's essential conversations to be had on both, but I think we have the capacity to really examine both. So that's what blackface is about.
Also, just the color blue
Yes.
is a sign of luxury, or
Totally.
indigo was like blue gold, and
Yes.
so you have that
We,
in there.
And we kind of discussed that a little bit in preparation for this amazing sharing is that historically, if you ever took an art history class in college, you know that blue was like the most expensive paint. It was the most expensive. I mean, all the pictures of royalty have people in blue robes and sashes. It was a whole thing. And historically, we just have not been in this country, not in Africa, but in this, we have not been in that position from the very beginning to have access to those things. So the fact that blue represents prestige and luxury and all those great things, I just felt it would be really cool to connect all those things to the blue. Also, if you take into consideration indigo, which was one of the very first plantation crops other than sugar, and we all know who was on the plantation. so, so blue represents a myriad of things for people of color, but I just happen to really like blue as well. So.
And it's also just the title. I mean, I love indigo. The title itself, when you're talking about blackface and all the negative, you know, connotations or denotations of like what that term is and what it means, and you know, through Jim Crow and like after the Civil Rights Movement and just everything.
Completely. I mean, even now, I think fairly recently, you've had this beautiful movement of people kind of embracing black faces, but that had to be an inward movement from our community. It was not outwardly done, at least on a mainstream level. So I think that was a definite play on words. But I broke the word up. It wasn't all one word. I broke it up because I wanted it to be identified as black and face.
Right. Black period. Face,
and there's been a really cool trend over the past 30 years in the black community of us taking ownership of words that were used to belittle us and embracing those words and giving them new meaning. And I'm all for it because what is a word more than something that we all gave meaning? You know? Yeah.
Sure.
That's one of my favorite pieces.
I love it. And I love how bright and colorful it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I would love to talk about your current exhibit,
Sure.
Negro Stories. Do you want to go into the history of that or how it came to be?
Sure. So Negro Stories so every year we have a theme. We have an annual theme that guides our work. It's like our mission statement. So last year's theme was free.
Wait, can I interrupt you for
Sure.
a second? So when you're talking about we, are you talking about Duplessis art?
Oh, okay. Great question. So I often, when people ask me about the work, I will say we rather than me. And it's not a pronoun thing. To be clear, I say we because even though I create all of the work, my husband is my business partner. And not just because I'm now in a new season where I'm losing my vision. He is such an amazing source of support. We have a 4-year-old daughter. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts to our life. And I fully believe that even though I am creating the work, in addition to him being my business partner, none of this would really be possible at this level without his support. So when I say we, I'm referencing Duplessis, our business. Yeah, so thank you for clarifying. Because people will be like, wait, so is your husband doing work too? I'm like, oh, honey, no.
Is he creating the art?
No. So that's what I mean by we. Yeah, totally. But we were, Duplessis Art has a theme, and this year's theme was healing history. Now, keep in mind, this theme was chosen well before the pandemic, well before all of the social unrest came to prominence. We just felt led to focus on history, and we had 400 plus years of material through which to use. So, under the umbrella of that theme each year, that guides our work. So, we were working on Negro Stories, and the ironic part is that, you know, our studio space is right here at Converge. And there have been amazing partners with us in the art district. But we actually came to John and met John and Linda for our first meeting, the founders and directors of Converge and Transforming Creatives, with the intention of hosting Negro Stories then. This is 2019. But for some reason, it just didn't come together. So we just kind of shelved it. And I ended up releasing Free that summer around Juneteenth. And then I said, you know what? The time is not right. And so we just sat on it and continued to do the research, the oral histories to inform the art. January of 2020, pre-pandemic still, I said, you know what, I feel led to release this show now. This has to happen. What we did not bargain for was all of the atrocities that we all witnessed because we were all in the house, and just how things unraveled, frankly, and just we had no idea that would happen. So we started doing Negro Stories because we had this running joke of sorts in our family and amongst me and my girlfriends of when we would have an incident of discrimination, and we would just call it a Negro story. Like, and it's so commonplace. And I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and she was like, "Are you going to so and so, so and so?" And I was like, "No, I'm not trying to go up in there, girl. It's the holiday. I don't want anyone to talk crazy to me. I have this huge coat. I am not trying to have a Negro story." So she started laughing, and she was like, "What?" I was like, "A Negro story. You know, when people like discriminate against you or just do like blatant racist things." So we started this conversation between our small group of friends, and everyone had a Negro story. And Allison, everyone had a Negro story every day. So then some of our friends who are allies and not people of color, they were blown away. They're like, "Y'all are dealing with this every day?" I was like, "Honey, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day, unless I don't leave my house." And then you might get Negro storied by phone if you call and use a certain type of voice or pitch. It was just ridiculous. So we start reflecting on all those things. You know, like when I went to look for an apartment in college, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm looking for an apartment." And they were so willing to show me the apartment. And then when I showed up, and I was not only black, I was big and black with a red afro and a gap, and they were like, "It's no longer available." So one woman said that. The other woman said, "Oh, I'm waiting for Chloe. We're saving it." I said, "Well, then
Wow.
great, honey, because I'm here. I'm here." So, you know, that's so common. So I told my husband, I said, "You know what? People are having a lot of Negro stories. We need to do something with this." And now is the perfect time to have these conversations. And a lot of the elders that I was working with and kind of volunteering with at the time, they were just like, "This is really painful. Why are you talking about this?" I was like, "What better time to have these conversations? We cannot keep
Right.
packing
Why
these things
wait?
away." Yeah, so Negro Story started as a conversation and then just kind of built, and now we have, I think, 68 stories.
And the stories go with your visuals.
Absolutely. So each piece is actually a Negro story. And it's either a story inspired by an actual story we've collected through the oral history component, because all of my work has an oral history component. That's a part of my process. So I will have an idea for inspiration, and then I will research the idea for a few months, and then I will take the next 6 months to a year to collect the stories. And I wanted to be very intentional in that because I wanted that to be, I didn't want my work just to be, "Oh, this is my interpretation. Get this, love it or don't love it." I really wanted it to be accessible and be community-based art. There's no other way to do it, I feel, other than to have the input of actual living, breathing people, because you can dismiss things if it's just someone's interpretation, depending on where you are. But you can't dismiss someone's truth. You may not agree, you may not love it, but it's someone's truth. So, like, these are all Negro stories. Every single one is a Negro story.
We could actually pull one up. Let's pull up Turning Channels, just so that our audience can see what we're looking at or talking about.
Yes. So Turning Channels was inspired in the heart of this researching process by the late poet Gil Scott Heron. So for people who are fans of early hip hop, of the New York scene, of poetry and spoken word, he was one of the pioneers. It's truly, truly gifted. And he had a song that was called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." If you haven't heard it, I suggest you go to YouTube after this is over and enjoy it. And it was just so revolutionary because he was speaking frankly from his own experience. And growing up in the neighborhood, people would always say, "Oh, honey, the revolution will not be televised," which basically meant that the trials and challenges of the working class, people of color, and poor people will never make it to mainstream media because no one really has an interest in that, depending on where they are. And even people who mean well are not trying to watch that at 6 p.m. on the news as they eat their TV dinner. So, like, all this stuff that came out last year, that never, in my experience, made it to mainstream news. We just didn't have a choice
Right.
because it was so relevant. So that was the play on words for that, because the revolution has been televised.
Finally.
Yeah.
And that spoken word was actually from the 1970s, which is
Right, right.
crazy to think about it.
Oh my gosh.
So
You've
all
heard-
the way from the
Yes.
1970s until 2021 or 2020 that, this is,
It's remarkable, and not in a good way. It's just like James Baldwin, who I adore. I mean, if you read some of his works, it's like he's literally writing this in real time. But I think that also speaks to the work that we have to do and the opportunity that we have to really go deeper, especially in this season, because the Band-Aid has been pulled off. we can legit just go in. Like, you grab tea tree, I'll grab peroxide, tell her to get some, cotton balls. Let's go for it.
I do think the pandemic actually helped create this, now that it is in
Yeah.
mainstream media and, the pandemic, everybody was home,
Yeah.
everybody was watching the TV and seeing what was going on with George Floyd. And
Totally. So, and I think it was almost, unfortunately, a perfect storm, for lack of a better term, because you had people in the house with people they had not even spoke, family members and animals that they had not seen for more than 30 minutes in years. So we were all ushered back inside in March, and we didn't know when this would end, and it just continued and it continued. And alongside the raging pandemic, people were losing people and things were going on. So we were all trying to escape in some way. So we were on our devices, we were watching television. And what you saw, due to the work of some brave onlookers, was video after video after video of brutality and force and death. And I think that really was a turning point for many, many people, particularly a lot of my friends who are allies. They were just like, hey, I was a well meaning white person, but I didn't know it was this deep. And I think that really speaks to the disparity, and it speaks to the distance in our experience, that we can all live in this place and have such very different experiences. Because if you ask anyone if last year's events were an awakening, they will say, honey, it's not an awakening for people of color. There were some nights when we could not sleep, literally.
right.
It's an awakening for the mainstream culture, but I think that in itself provides an opportunity for us to really tap into that. And for those that are willing, have those conversations, unpack those things, and let's really develop a way to move forward.
Yeah, I think social media also, the news sources aren't the ones that are dictating all the news anymore.
No.
It's everyday people,
No,
which is great.
No, because, things have shifted a little bit, but traditional news, keep in mind, I was a mass comm major before I changed to history. So one thing I learned from the first 2 years was it will take you forever to be an anchor. So I was like, I don't have that kind of time. 11 years, I'm out of here. But secondly, news is largely governed by what advertisers need to push. So the odds that you will actually find a news show that are actually telling the truth of what's going on out there are slim, just because they're governed by those constraints. I think that social media has provided a platform for people to tell authentic stories, because it can be unfiltered, it can be raw. And with some of these videos, like the Floyd video, for those of us who saw it, you can't unsee that. You can't see that and not be changed, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Let's look at another one of the Negro stories, piece of artwork called Welcome.
Yes.
If you could describe this to
Yes.
our audience.
Yes. So Welcome is a majestic piece of one of my favorite monuments. I've always been a fan of the Statue of Liberty, just the history of the Statue of Liberty, what it means, what it represents, even though that's up into interpretation. I do know that in Black culture, for years and years and years, there was this story going around that the model for the Statue of Liberty was a woman of color, and that the original gift was presented in recognition of slaves who came to America without their consent. So it was almost a gift to say, hey, this is what's going on. We're not fans of it, but we hope this will represent liberty. So some people say that that's not true. People go back and forth, historians debate that. But I always thought that would be a trip if that were true, and that she actually did have chains at the base of her feet, and you can find information about this online. But regardless of whether there was a woman of color who was the muse for that statue, I think it is ironic that this beautiful piece of work that still stands represents all the things that you hear about in elementary school, about promise and freedom and liberty. She is that thing. But at the base of the statue, you'll see a very real, not a reproduction, a very real Jim Crow sign that I found when researching for Negro stories that was actually displayed at a small business in the South until about 20 years ago.
So just so our audience is tuned in, so the message reads in really big cap letters, no, and then so it's no dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans.
Yes.
So I did a little bit of research on this particular piece, the Statue of Liberty, not your piece, because I was talking to you about your piece.
Right, right.
It turns out that there's a museum, a new museum, a Statue of Liberty museum, and they are telling that story. And in 2019, the story that's being told, and granted, this is, everybody always thought it was a welcome for all the immigrants that were coming in on the boats. Right. But the story that's now being told in this museum, and you can look this up, it's like a Washington Post article from 2019.
I love that it's recent, by the way.
It's recent. Well, the museum is also new. This particular museum is new. And the original design for it was French abolitionists.
Yes.
Yeah, French abolitionists got together and they decided that they wanted to create a statue in honor of, slavery, of people being freed.
Right.
And the civil rights movement and anti-slavery and everything. And the original design for the Statue of Liberty was actually a woman holding shackles,
right,
and a torch in the other hand. And through the years of when they finally were getting funds and everything for the actual statue being made, it wound up being that it was a tablet that said the United States Independence Day of July 4th, but the shackles were now at Lady Liberty's feet. So it really is an homage to, the civil rights movement and, but
but wait, didn't that give you chills when you read that? Were you like, what?
Yes.
We're not learning this in third grade, y'all. We're not on the museum field trip. No one is telling people this story. Gosh.
So
that's, I love that. I love that you went and researched that. That's
I
awesome.
love this piece of artwork. I think it's so powerful and amazing. So let's keep moving. There's another piece that you have that's not part of Negro Stories that's called I Am Liberty.
Yes.
So we'll let our audience see that image.
And this piece is a fairly new piece. This was created last month. And this piece will more than likely be the cover art for my coffee table book that comes out this fall. And this piece is a piece of a woman. She's channeling her Statue of Liberty-ness. So it's taken from the back of a woman. So she's essentially standing and her right arm is extended. And there is no tablet. She's just standing there. But on the left-hand side, you will see a brief, like a strip, a vertical strip of the flag. So you'll have stars and stripes on the left-hand side. And that, if you look at my work, particularly in Negro Stories, but in most of my work, there will be, unless it's for a special project, there will always be the flag. Now, this may not be the case next year. I may be moved by inspiration elsewhere. But for the past 3 years, my work has always had either the red, white, and blue or the flag. And it's a very specific flag. It's the flag from 1964, pre-Juneteenth. And it's for a reason. Because in the work that's dealing with, my work centers around history, healing, and culture. So it's impossible to talk about our challenges as a country centered around race without acknowledging that the ideology is ever present. So when you look at some of the pieces on my website or the virtual tour for Negro Stories, you'll see the red, white, and blue, you'll see the flag, and it's the very same flag, just different renditions of it. So that piece is my new favorite piece. And again, that's actually me. I literally was in our home studio, and I told my husband, I was like, I got an idea for a piece. I'm gonna put this scarf on. Can you put a cartoon on for Zoe and come take this picture? And bless his heart, he never knows where I'm going with this, but the end product is always like, that's cool, that's dope. So we took several actual versions of that picture, but as I was telling you, I am a proud plus size woman. It was just too much behind on the full body picture. I was like, "Ooh, honey, we can't have all that booty in the picture. That'll take away from the message." So we ended up doing the picture from the waist up, and I think that it was even more powerful because we did that.
Yeah. Just so everybody knows, so that's just to confirm, that's a flag from during the civil rights.
Yeah.
The Civil War.
That's a flag from the Civil War. wait, maybe it is a flag from 19 something. That's the flag from 1864. Because if you know your history about Juneteenth, you know, we, as in people of color, we were free for a while before we got the message. We didn't get the message until 60, I believe 65. And that's the whole purpose of Juneteenth. It's a celebration the nation over of getting the news, of getting the news. And I typically do something significant with my art every Juneteenth, just to commemorate that.
So do you consider yourself an activist or a like social justice artist?
So I'm not opposed to it. A lot of people use those terms and use them interchangeably. I think that in a way it kind of does a disservice to people who actually are like wearing that as their badge, like they live and breathe and sleep this. So it doesn't offend me in any way. I appreciate the recognition. I think I'm simply an observer. I am an artist, I am an observer, and I am a woman of color. And I firmly believe, like one of my muses, Nina Simone, that our artist's job is to reflect the times that we're in. So being a woman who is from the South, who has had the benefit of traveling, you know, globally and seeing different ways that people are celebrated or impressed and whatnot, I just could not, nothing against anyone else. I couldn't show up doing landscapes and doing flowers, you know, or coffee tables. It wasn't authentic to who I am and my experience. And I also think when so much is going on in the world, if my work is centered by history, culture, and healing, how do you not create work that reflects the times that we are in, you know? So I simply say I'm an observer. I'm just, and I think that's what so is really, really cool, and I'm grateful. I can't take credit for it. I think it's a total God thing. I love that in the work, I never try to sway people. I use found images. You know how some people use found objects in their work? I use found images. So like the picture Welcome, Statue of Liberty, you know, this iconic figure of all things welcoming and nurturing. I didn't create the Jim Crow sign. It existed and it predates me, but the message is still relevant.
So your art is to inform.
It's to inform. It's to inform on both sides, you know, because as people of color, oftentimes we have not had the privilege of learning our story, our greatness. Unless you have family members who are educators, who are historians, who share that with you, it's just not taught in schools. But I think by the same token, there needs to be more focus on having this renewed sense of history or revised and updated sense of history, because Caucasian children and children of other backgrounds are missing out when they don't get the full story as well. You know, you have two amazing kids. They deserve to know that their colleagues, ancestors did these great things. Everyone needs to be seen. And I think that really is one of the driving forces of my work. I'm trying to eliminate stories of people who have been dismissed, whitewashed, or forgotten. And that is why you will see people who typically would not be elevated. They will be ignored. Honey, you won't see nobody just posing a big plus size black woman with a greasy neck. You're not going to see that in mainstream, you know, but the neck is only greasy because it was hot outside. But to that end, you know, you just don't see these things. I think also too is really cool to mention. People ask me, why am I in so much of my work? Not the pieces that were actual exhibitions, but a lot of my work that's digital, that's online or on my Instagram page. I will just use versions of myself and use filters or chop it up and splice it up. Or I'll use my family, my daughter or my husband, if they're willing. But I started doing that because with the pandemic, it wasn't safe. You didn't have access to models and friends and whatnot. And then the more I began to do that, I was going through a whole Frida Kahlo phase, and I remember one of her quotes is, "I paint myself because it's who I know best," and that just resonated with me. And I don't need a waiver for myself, you know. I'm not gonna come back in 2 years and say, "Hey, you used my likeness." No. So I just started using myself, and then the more I did it, it became more of a cultural statement and a statement of beauty, because big women, big black women, are not the first choice in campaigns and in art and things that people view of beauty. And everyone doesn't feel that way, you know, but I just thought it's time to use some big black women.
It's also your story, right?
It is my story. And let me tell you, I've only been a big black woman for 15 years. I was rail thin growing up, and I prayed for a behind and hips, honey, and now it just won't go away. You know, so you adapt in your season. Childbirth helped too. Thanks, Zoe. But like, yeah. So I see both sides. Now I remember being so slim, and the cultural standard was to really support and idolize and want voluptuous women, particularly in the South where I'm from. And because I was just straight up and down and flat chested, honey, I wanted a behind so bad. And I wanted to be curvaceous and be viewed that way. It just wasn't the case until I went to college, and I went to college in New Orleans, and everything had gravy. And I was like, let's do this. So, be careful what you ask for. But I feel like I see both sides. And I also recognize the discrimination that people, women, and big women experience. Because as large as I am, I'm 6'1" and about 350. I will go into a place before, and I've had people say, they'll take someone over me, and I'll say, ma'am, I was in line. And I have heard repeatedly, at least once or twice every other month for the past 10 years, I'm sorry, I did not see you. And it's not a Southern thing because, we have this habit of packing racism and discrimination neatly at the bottom of the South because that's convenient for us. But, Jim Crow was started in the North. It very much is a Western society thing. I've been in places on the East Coast and people said they didn't see me. And they weren't lying, So there's a need for this work, and there's a need for these voices. And that's why I'm just so grateful for the gift of being able to create.
Yeah. So do you feel like you're advancing culture in your work?
I can only pray and hope. I can only pray and hope. And because I don't know for how long, that is why I am so focused on creating these stories as inspiration comes and researching and pulling people in and telling their stories so that there will be this multifaceted view of what marginalized peoples have endured and are enduring. It definitely plays a big role. Yeah, I have a desire to advance culture.
Well, I think you're doing it.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to just backtrack a teeny bit.
Sure.
Your book is something you're creating, and it's going to come out
Yes.
in the fall.
Yes.
And then Negro Stories is something that you have exhibited here in Denver.
Yes.
And now you're moving on to New Orleans.
Yes. So Negro Stories debuted January the 11th right here at Converge. And I think it's so funny how things happen because the original vision for the show is not what came to pass. I originally approached John Mikowski, the director, and I said, I want there were just going to be 10 Negro stories, 5 on the left-hand side, huge pieces, 5 on the right-hand side. Ideally, the person viewing the art would come in and see this work flanked, experience the story, and then go to a very large piece in the back, and they would have the option in real time to type or write and share what they were feeling or share their Negro story, and then they would be ushered to a small area where we'd have a 5-minute meditation so they could release. Because I have no interest in creating art that just has people burdened down and just exhausted. I feel like we have enough of that. I really want the work to be cathartic for people of color or for allies who've witnessed discrimination, because a lot of allies say, oh, my child, my husband, my classmate, they've seen it. They just didn't know it was a Negro story because we've normalized that conversation. We just think it's what is. I've had so many beautiful people, so many allies come to me and say, I think I have a few Negro stories. I'm like, honey, you do. If you do. And if you happen to be one of those rare people who has not experienced discrimination in your own life, if you know who George Floyd is, you've got a Negro story. So that's the premise of the show. Everyone has a Negro story. Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm also trying to get at is that now this has gone from this particular area,
right,
and it's starting to move around the country.
Right.
And I know, just as an artist, we always struggle to find sources or places of discovery, be it a gallery or walls here in Denver with murals or something, places that were going to be discovered.
Right.
And what I love is that not only is this an interactive exhibit where people can put in their what's happened to them and add their story, but I also love that you also approached a hotel chain about this. And so you found opportunity for your art to be shown elsewhere that I don't think a lot of artists really know about. So if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. And to your point, because I get so excited about this work. To your point, it started, so the version of Negro Stories that actually came because we were socially distanced was essentially just 20 stories. And there was a story I chose the number 20 because the first Africans to settle in 1619, well, settle, to be brought here in 1619 in the area that is now Hampton, Virginia. There were 20 of them. So those stories are for 20, each one is for my ancestors. So when the story came, when the actual show was here, we did not plan for all, we didn't plan, but we welcomed it, for all this beautiful support and love. And people kept saying, is it just going to be here? Is it going to sit here? And I was like, no, it should travel. It should travel. But again, to your point, because of the pandemic, because things were not moving traditionally, a lot of galleries were not open or weren't taking requests for public safety reasons. I said, you know what? We've got to approach this a different way. So I prayerfully started looking for really cool, non-traditional venues to exhibit the work. I even talked to John a little bit about doing something potentially in terms of public art, which would be a dream, do something outside. And I came across an entire different business model. And I think that's so cool. And I want to encourage artists, not just visual artists, but to create the opportunities that you are seeking. If you don't see it, there's definitely a way for you to create something of value. So I reached out to this hotel chain, and I didn't even know they had an artist in residence program. I was just reaching out because they happen to have the same core values as me, as a human, and our business. They are an arts inspired boutique hotel. They celebrate history. They are all about authentic diversity and inclusion, and they have been that way since they launched their business like early 2000s. And I'm literally sitting here at my computer, and I'm just like, this is amazing. And I'm typing, and the more I read, and I'm just like, and even in the advertising, this may not be a mainstream thing for people who are in the mainstream, but for people of color, if I go to your website or I see your advertising and I don't see myself, while that's the norm, I am excited when I see myself. And they had everyone in their ads and in their marketing, and they had not just people of color, they had people of color with natural hair, and they had persons who were in same-sex relationships, and you could see it from the advertising. And I was like, this is a whole new type of movement. So I just put together a press kit and reached out to them. And, sometimes you never hear back. That's the chance you have to take when you're pitching your own work, and you don't take it personal because they don't know you, but you have to keep on going. So I reached out to them, and they responded, and they said, you know what? I actually pitched them the idea of the show coming, and then they told me they had the Artist in Residence program that was not active last year, but will be active this year since things are opening up. So we kind of settled somewhere in between on being an artist in residence. And typically with their artist in residence, you bring a whole new body of work to it, or you create one while you're on site at the property. But when I sent them the information for Negro Stories, they were like, so could you bring that? Bring this show. So I was like, yeah, I can bring it. Let's put this joke on the road. And I think it really is important that it is my national show. Now, I've produced national shows for clients for years, but it's my first national show. And my first national show as an artist. And I'm just so grateful because I get to go, New Orleans is like my second home. I went to college in New Orleans. I met my husband in New Orleans. The city has given me so much. So to be able to go back to New Orleans, have the national show, exhibit Negro Stories, and to create an original piece of work in tribute to the people of New Orleans is extraordinary, because at the very end of my show on the 12th of June, I will unveil a brand new piece. And that piece will remain on site at the property. So it will live there. And it's going to be called Lagniappe.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It doesn't come without hard work, though.
It's work, yeah. And even if the piece is not created, the framework is created. So that piece is going to be a digital mosaic of about 100 images. So as soon as we roll into New Orleans next Tuesday, we're gonna get a nap, we're gonna hydrate because it's gonna be hot as a Dickens in New Orleans. But we're gonna take the next 2 days and just go around the city and visit landmarks and places of importance and talk to people and do interviews and capture those images for this piece. So I am really grateful for this opportunity. But I think this wouldn't have happened if we had not pursued alternative methods of getting the word out there. Like, no one called me and was like, this is a dope show, come to me. Maybe that will happen in the future. I'm welcoming that. But that didn't happen. So I think that visual artists, particularly, or musicians, or storytellers, you have to be an advocate for your work. You cannot expect other people to just find out how amazing you are and just offer these things to you. It doesn't happen like that. Rarely.
Right.
Yeah, right, right,
Unless,
right. But
you're
when it
just
does,
over it.
I'm here for it.
So I know a lot of in conversations that we've had, your faith has become,
Yes.
as a driving force for a lot of your work, who you are as a person. And we can pull up another piece called Recycled Faith.
Yes, yes. And this is a fairly new piece. This piece was created, I started creating this piece after we lost Chadwick Boseman. And I think one of the many reasons 2020 was so challenging was that there were so many things that were uncertain. And the truth is, none of this is ever under our control, but we had the illusion of control, which many of us were clinging to with both hands and feet. But I think what also made it troubling was you had a number, particularly for the Black community, for certain areas of the Black community, you had a number of the people that we held in high esteem transition. So even if you weren't a sports fan, when Kobe Bryant and his daughter passed away in that crash, there was a feeling. There was a feeling because you saw him grow up. There was a feeling because it happened so quickly. There was a feeling because he was doing good work. There was this this feeling because his young daughter perished as well. There was just a feeling. A lot of people in the community grew up with Kobe Bryant. So it was just, yeah. And then you just had this gradual transition of just elders and artists and creatives. And I think when Chadwick Boseman passed, I believe it was August, it just really hit a lot of people for a number of reasons. A lot of people didn't know that he was ill, which was his business. But also, people loved Black Panther and what that movie represented in our community. And for the first time, if you're thinking in terms of science fiction, comic book movies, superhero movies, you'd never seen a movie with that level of quality, with that kind of budget, with that cast. All the imagery of that movie just did so much for many families who were into that and many children. So now you have young kids and he's their hero and he transitions. So I just saw on social media and through my own nephews and people in the family, people were just mourning. There was such a heaviness. And this is on the heels of Floyd and Breonna and Aubrey. I mean, you can't even jog, you can't sing your own house. There was just this heaviness. And I saw so many people questioning their faith, openly questioning their faith. Now, we may all do it at some point in the house over a cup of tea, but people were openly questioning their faith. And it didn't mean that they didn't love God. It meant that they were so heartbroken. They were just heartbroken. And I feel like faith is one of those things where if you do subscribe and have a notion of faith or believe in a higher power, that you go through those seasons where you just feel, you feel disappointed because life is still going on. But we have to remember that God does not change. Faith does not change. We move. We move. And God is so faithful that if we're fortunate, when we come back, God is still there. So if you look in that piece and you see how it's like crumpled paper, just imagine when someone uses something and they have no use for it and they toss it in the waistband and they're over it. I just wanted to feel like somebody literally reached into a wastebasket, unrolled this paper, didn't feel compelled to get a brand new sheet of paper because the divots and all those nooks and crannies have value and depth. And then I wanted to use the universal symbol for Christianity and for faith, for my faith. And the flag is still there. So the flag is still there. It's chilling on the picture. But so, I'm honoring the fact that we still have much work to do. And depending on who what area of the country you're talking about, Christianity was used to colonize many areas. So for people of color, we have a lot of reconciliation that oftentimes we have to do in order to hold on to that faith. So that's what that piece is for. If you just hang in there, you will find that God has not changed. Yeah.
And I know you've said your faith has shifted slightly to be more, spiritual.
Right.
And I know that basic quality or foundation has really helped people through the pandemic.
It's true, and I don't know. I mean, some people just say I don't have to have that. I don't need that. And I have a love of all things ecumenical. I have a love of all people. I never tell someone um, that this is what you need to do. I don't think that's our place. I just know what works for me and what has worked for me over the years. And I did grow up in a very traditional Baptist upbringing. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher for over 60 years, and so I grew up deep, deep in the church. I'm talking like Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, no, we could chill on Friday, but Saturday, like we were always up in church. Like, and if you weren't in worship, you were serving, you were volunteering. It was all the things. And I think when I went to college, I was naive enough to think that everyone had that same experience. And it wasn't until I had a college roommate who was an atheist, and she was telling me something about Christmas, and I was like, "But you don't even celebrate Christmas. That's our thing." And she was just like, "So you think all black people are doing this?" That was the first time I'd heard that, and it made my heart just like. But it was through that experience that I began to branch out and study different religions, and just saw how there were so many areas of connection and consistency. So my belief system is rooted in Christianity, but it's much more spiritual. Whereas before I went to church to hear the word, that was how I was brought up, and that had so much value in that season. And the church has been an amazing cultural mover for people of color. It's all we had at one point. I mean, you were literally picking cotton on Monday, but on Sunday you could be a deacon, and that had value. And all major movements came through the black church, essentially. But I recognized that going and listening and waiting for the word did not have as much value for me as I got to be older and really went through some real life things. I needed to study every day. I needed to create that space. I needed to have that morning rituals, particularly as a woman, as a creative, as an artist. I needed to have that meditation time. And I then began pulling pieces that worked well for me to create my own spiritual practice. And it has just made all the difference.
That has now led me on a tangent.
We love tangents.
Because I know you do mood boards and you do
Yes.
inspiration boards, and that's like a guide and an action plan, and those wind up being like your guiding force for the year.
Yes. Yes.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, sure. And I've been doing those for years. So most people call them, vision boards. I think we all went through that phase where Oprah did this show on vision boards, and everyone was like obsessed with the vision boards. But it was like, we've got to do it. It won't happen if we don't do it. I don't know. It might help, but I don't know if it will happen. But at this point, I've been doing, action plans and vision boards for about 15 years. And I will honestly say that of the 15 years I've been doing vision boards, honestly, Allison, almost everything comes to fruition. So I think it has something to do with having the courage to say, this is what is on my heart. Giving yourself permission to say, this is what I desire. And it is a process, because when I first started doing it culturally, I felt uncomfortable saying that I would like this thing or this opportunity, because we're socialized to not do that. We're socialized not to even have those kind of plans. So it felt like this beautiful luxury. And like for the first few years, I wouldn't even tell people I was doing a vision board. I was like, they're not going to be in my business looking at my goals. And then the more it began to work, I was like, there's something to this. So I took it a step further and started doing, action plans. I was already doing strategic plans for business and for work. And I was like, what if we apply that to life, more of a life plan of sorts? And then when I started my consulting company, it just made sense. I started doing them with my clients, and having that real-time calendar where you actually say, these are my 10 goals for the year. And then you don't just stop there, because most people stop there. They have the goal. They're like, I got it out. Great. They take that vision board with all that horrible magazine article paper and they put it in the closet. You don't even know where that thing is. So I said, what you need to do is do these 3 things. You need to place it in a prominent place in your home so you see it every day, so it resonates in your spirit. So you were encouraged and you're reminded of, I need to do these things. That's what I said I wanted. That's what I was petitioning God for, if it was in God's will that would happen in my life. Also, I wanted them to actually develop a list of supporting tasks, because some people would say, I want to move. I want a new home. I want a job. I want a kid, or start planning for a kid, or I want to, launch a business. And that's where it ends. And oftentimes that's why it doesn't come to fruition. But if you go underneath that goal and you list what it will take to bring that to fruition, what partnerships do I need? What resources do I need? Should I join an association or the chamber? Should I go back to school? Do I have to release some negative energy or some people, places, or things that are holding me back? I always say that every person has at least 3 people that deserve a Dear John letter. Not just now, like last week, last pandemic. Like, so everyone has someone who sees them as just serve their purpose. And we're just keeping them along because they make us feel comfortable and they create this illusion that everything is okay. But in your heart of hearts, if you are not where you want to be, it is not just as simple as putting an image on a piece of plaster or cardboard. You have to do the work. You have to find out what's required to do this. The energy is required, the money required, the relationships required. And then you have to mentally make room. Donate clothing, release people in love. Don't be confrontational. Don't tell anyone I told you to do that. But release people in love and make room for that. Because oftentimes people tell me, I feel so full. They do, because they don't have any capacity. They're full of stuff. They're full of energy and issues. The house is full of energy and issues. The relationships have seen their due. So we started doing this practice with our clients 10 years ago, and we saw people not only transform their lives, we saw artists transform their lives in like 30 days or less.
Wow.
Because you haven't addressed these issues, you know? And let me just say, I am not a licensed anything, da 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 da. I have 7 years of college behind me and a degree and 2 certifications, but I'm not a mental health professional. Hats off to those who are. I'm simply someone who is an observer who has been doing this work for a long time, and I know that there is power in saying, I give myself permission to pursue this goal. I know this goal will serve and make things better, and I'm willing to do the work to do it. And so I do it all the time. I do an annual vision board, and then I do one for each quarter. And I do it for each quarter because I think what's really important for artists, things change for us often. We're supported by inspiration and by vision, and that can really, really change. So to say that this is gonna be my whole year and to never revisit it, you do yourself a disservice. So we do that quite often, and I love that process.
I need to do that.
Let's schedule a session.
This is
It's
part of
fun.
my intention and goal. So let's talk about the programs that Duplessis Art offers.
Yes.
And
yes.
because I went through it at the very beginning and I breezed through it so quickly. But if you want to talk about the residencies that you do,
Sure.
in businesses and schools and as community builders, and we could also look at a piece of artwork.
Yes. Forward.
So this next piece of artwork is called Forward, and maybe this can lead us through this discussion.
So Forward is a fairly new piece of work that was created I can't believe we're in June. That was created in March. And Forward was a piece that was created informed by the actual surveys and stories I collected through my partnership with one of Denver's most historic churches, Trinity United Methodist Church. They're one of our creative community builders and partners, and they have just been a blessing to us. We actually connected with Trinity through our partnership with John and Linda Mikowski, and that's another great way to really tap into people who are like-minded. When you come across someone, when God sends you to someone who has similar values and goals, they will almost always have a beautiful circle of people who have the same. So we're just really blessed by that partnership. And it was really cool because the Creative Community Builder program was actually launched as a way for me to engage well-meaning, intentional businesses and nonprofit organizations in becoming more cross-racial and more inclusive. And this piece, you'll see, it is a series of profiles. And starting from the left of the piece, all the colors are tied to a very specific energy or idea or concept. So at the very bottom, you have the blue. The blue is at the very foundation of the piece. It's meant to represent the ocean, the water, the Atlantic. That's what got this whole party started, honey, in terms of enslaved peoples. So it's important to note those things. The next color you'll see is of the red for the blood that was shed and is still being shed, not just from Black people, but people of color in general in this country under many different circumstances. And then you see the purple. The purple is meant to represent all things that are regal and royal and It has lots of significance in terms of culture and history and legacy for persons of color. And that is there to represent the fact that no matter what happens, what we endure, we still have these beautiful ties to greatness. And it's particularly important for our children to know that, because I think oftentimes Black children are taught that their experience as people of color started with slavery, and that's not true. The diaspora is huge and profound, and our contributions are extraordinary. So we need to start teaching a different story to Black children and children of all races to really embrace a new outcome. The green is meant to represent greed at all costs. And that could be taken in the form of capitalism, it can be in the form of colonization, however you feel the need to interpret it. Wanting to do well is not a crime or a sin, I feel. But wanting to do well at the expense of human beings is a problem. And it's our problem collectively. And then you'll see, of course, the faces that are merging from the left to the right. And it's meant to symbolize the cultural awareness and the cultural awakening. We have this overwhelming need to talk about collective healing. How do we get back to what's normal and feels good? Well, for a sector of the population, that has never been our truth. So I think for the first time in a long time, everyone has been kind of inconvenienced, is uncomfortable, and is feeling a little bit of like what it felt like for many people. But while we're talking about collective healing, we have to be mindful that we cannot do such without talking about collective trauma. So this is the start, and this piece is called Forward. And it was inspired by the entire process of partnering with Trinity and hearing those stories. They have a beautiful Monday night group that was meeting for over a year as a result of the George Floyd tragedy. And they were reading articles and watching videos and having conversations every single Monday night for people who were willing and open. And I initially joined the group just to kind of connect with people because we were all indoors and I thought they might be like minded. And I've just been blessed beyond measure. Several of the people in the group are now not only collectors, but dear friends. And that's what it's going to take. And I think for people of color, we've been so wounded for so long, there is a tendency to say, I don't have the capacity for that. And look, I feel you. But for those of us who have kids or who care about kids, we don't have the luxury of just shutting down. We don't. So if someone of another ethnicity or race is willing to do their own work, and don't ask your Black friends to tell you about racism and oppression. That's too much. It's too much. We didn't start it. We didn't kick it off. We don't have the capacity to do that because, keep in mind, Black people don't get a timeout. I can't go in when this is over, like on Looney Tunes and clock in like the sheepdog and say, I'm done. I'm just going to put my oppression here. Like there's no timeout for us. So be mindful of that. But if you are an ally and you are interested, Google is a great tool. Do your own work, your own research, and seek to show up. And know that showing up truly as an ally means that you're showing up every day because we have to show up every day.
On that note, Chloe, it's such a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise.
Always. We have unfortunately run out of time.
No
I feel like
worries.
we could go on forever. But this has been wonderful. And
Likewise.
how can people support you and show up for you?
Totally. So there are 3 ways that you can support the work that we do through Duplessis Art. You can donate. If you go to my website and you click on support, you can make a tax-deductible donation of any size, and those funds will directly go to support our essential work here in Greater Colorado, Louisiana, and this fall in the Caribbean, where we'll be launching an arts institute with the Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts. So that's super exciting. That's how you can help, the first way. The second way is to collaborate. If you would like for me to do an artist talk or offer a cultural capacity building workshop, because I offer 3 ways to work. I have art exhibitions. I also do cultural content programming if you're looking to start an arts program or artist in residence program dealing with these issues and these areas of opportunity. I do that as well. So, I'd love to collaborate with you. I'd love to bring you on as a partner. And the final way that you can do so doesn't require any money. Doesn't require you submit your business to be a partner. You can simply share our work. You can follow us on Instagram at duplessis.art. You can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel of the same name, duplessis.art, and you can share it with your network or people who you think might be interested in history, healing, and what that means for all of us moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So this has been Creative Assembly. My name is Alison Green, and Creative Assembly is a program of Denver-based nonprofit Transforming Creatives, whose mission is to invest in the health of creatives so they can invest in the health of society. Creative Assembly is made possible by the generous support of folks like you. Please, please, please visit us on transformingcreatives.com to discover how you could be part of the creative force for common good. So thank you.